Everybody, thanks for watching on Against Critical Capitalism. Thanks for joining me. This is the Against Critical Capitalism podcast for September 11th, 2024. Today we're going to talk about the debate. How can we not? We're going to talk about Russia and China and their maneuvers. We're going to talk about the Grateful Dead. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about September 11th on the anniversary of the attacks. Anyway, first, the debate. Okay, so the general assessment is that Harris more or less won. And, having watched it from, just a debate standpoint, I think that's probably pretty right. Now, I will say that she obviously had a lot of help from the moderators, but that's to be expected. That's just the way it is. I mean, if you think about it, it is pretty amazing that there is ever a Republican elected to the presidency ever. You figure the media. I saw some statistic where it was like ABC News ran over like the past 2 weeks or something. 100% of their Kamala stories were positive, and 93% of them were negative. I'll try to find a link and put it in the post here. Anyway, but they knew. I mean, it's ABC Disney. If there's any, this is a corporation that isn't exactly friendly to Republicans. And I know the Trump people probably knew that. I always wonder, I'm like, why do you guys give in, to these folks? I mean, at the very least, have somebody from ABC and then News Nation and then maybe one of the more right-ish networks. That only seems fair, especially if it's the only debate. But anyway, Trump stumbled somewhat, but it wasn't that bad. I was listening to a pollster earlier today talking about what he is seeing, and he's basically saying there might be a very, very modest bump for Kamala, but it's likely not long-lived. And that the trend generally since kind of peak Kamala has been kind of going like this with her. We'll see. Who knows? Frankly, I just wanted the debate to be over. I didn't want to watch it in the first place, but given my line of business, I have to watch it. It is painful to watch both of those people, both Trump and Kamala doing their thing, and then you watch the moderators, and you're like, oh, I cannot even believe that you said this and did say this, and people in my house are getting worked up. Anyway, including me, a little bit. So anyway, it was not as entertaining as the Biden implosion, but overall, it probably doesn't mean all that much. At least that's our assessment. All right, Russia and China. Now, who is going to be commander-in-chief? Now, okay, let me back up. So I was talking to a colleague today about a book called The Last Babylon. And for those of you who don't know, it's basically the story. It was written in 1960, I believe. It's a great book, by the way. I encourage everybody to read it. But basically the story is of a nuclear attack on the United States. And it's based in this time where it was believed that we had this thing called the bomber gap. Okay, that the Soviets had more bombers than we did. All right? And there was some fear that as our tech came more online with intercontinental ballistic missiles, okay, so those things, the ones that launch out of the silos, they were just coming online. And there was some fear that the Soviets would, because they didn't have that tech, but they had more bombers and they were superior, at least that's what we thought. It turns out there was no bomber gap. But anyway, in policy circles, there was some fear that the Soviets would move to bomb us first because they had this window of opportunity before, we brought the ICBMs on. Thank God that didn't happen. But in the book, it does. And, it occurred to me as I'm, listening to Trump and Kamala talking back and forth. And in my head, I'm thinking to myself, well, who is running who the White House at this point. I mean, we don't know. I mean, it seems like we're on autopilot right now, and I don't know if that's the best thing. And so word comes down that the Chinese, I believe they announced this originally in July, but the Chinese and the Russians are in a huge joint military exercise, which has over 400 ships, a ton of planes, the whole bit, okay? And it's in the Arctic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Caspian Sea, the Med, and the Baltic Sea. I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, they're spending bazillions of dollars on this to do this. And they're not just doing it to play around. They're seeing what works and what doesn't work, what breaks and what doesn't break. And why are they doing that? Well, let's hope they're just, keeping... It's not worse than just maneuvers, okay? But it did strike me that we have a situation right now where, frankly, this country looks terrible. I mean, we had Trump almost assassinated. We have Kamala, who is basically installed into running for the presidency as a Democrat, even though she never had a vote from a delegate anywhere. And we have a president who spent like 2 weeks on the beach in Delaware. If you're Xi or you're Putin or maybe you're someone else, and you think that it is possible that Trump could come back into the presidency, and that he is likely to give you a lot more problems than the current administration. How many opportunities, air quotes again, sorry, are there, where you have this confluence of events, where the United States looks as disorganized as it does. Now, perhaps we're not disorganized. Perhaps it's all working like, it's just working all great, but it sure seems crazy. And between now and the election, it seems like anything could happen. And I mean that even, from an international perspective, from a war perspective. I know let's hope not, obviously. And I certainly don't think that something would come from China or Russia where they would expand, the sort of little pockets of conflict that we have that, starting to feel increasingly like World War III, But it's possible. I mean, when you have a no-show president, you have Kamala, possibly, doing her, she's doing her thing. Trump coming online, who probably is seen as a threat. I don't know. We got to keep our eyes open. All right, on that very serious topic, we're going to talk about something a little less serious, and that's the Grateful Dead. Now, I am a Deadhead. I am a proud Deadhead. I love the Grateful Dead. I've loved the Grateful Dead since I was in high school. I'm a fan. I have seen many, not nearly as many as a lot of people, but a good number of Grateful Dead shows, like the Grateful Dead, and Dead shows, post Jerry Garcia. Yesterday I posted an essay that I wrote 10 years ago. I was just inspired to do it, and I thought I'd talk about it a little bit. And that is, the article is entitled, Why I Believe in Free Markets, Witness Grateful Dead concert parking lot. And it is so true. If you've never been to a Grateful Dead show, or, hung out in a parking lot around a Dead show, it really is an amazing example of free markets. Now, in the parking lot, it depends on where you are, but generally speaking, this was my experience. Now, you have this parking lot, you got all these, these kids in there, and there are no drug laws, mostly. People, generally speaking, you don't see people, we're talking about soft drugs, for the most part, okay? There are no alcohol licensure laws. I mean, there are. They bust people every once in a while, but when I was, I remember seeing my first shows. Like for some reason, Deadheads love Canadian beer. At least they did back then. And these guys would show, they have their Subaru station wagon or maybe like an old VW bus or a Vanagon or something, and they'd have these coolers full of beer. And that's how a lot of these guys made it from show to show. That they would sell the beer that they bought, somewhere fairly cheap, and then sell it at a premium at the Dead show, and then survive until the next show. There were, as far as copyright is concerned, I mean, there was basically none. I mean, there were T-shirts with, all sorts of logos. I remember Calvin and Hobbes. The number of Calvin and Hobbes Grateful Dead T-shirts I saw for a couple of years there is just mind-boggling. Okay, I mean the copyright infringement was is just off the charts, and there's all sorts of stuff like that. Again, those laws were temporarily suspended in the parking lot. And the thing is, what was interesting is with all of this commerce, and there's tons of commerce. I mean, there were people selling drugs, for sure, but people selling tickets, selling beer, selling T-shirts, selling food. Man, hippies know how to make a veggie bagel. I'm telling you, if you go to like a good show, like a Dead show or something like that, one of these jam band shows, like get yourself a veggie bagel, because I mean some of my fondest memories eating a veggie bagel post Grateful Dead show. You guys who have been to a few Dead shows, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, the point is, I can remember sitting there looking around. I'm a college student, learning about economics and politics and stuff, and I'm like, man, this is the greatest example of self-ordering markets there has ever been. It's peaceful. People are exchanging goods and services. There's no problem. You don't have the government getting involved. And show after show, it ordered itself. There's a place, that is commonly referred to as Shakedown Street, where, people would sell, everything, from parkas to paraphernalia, I mean, anything you want, it was right there. And no matter, what show it was, one of these places, this little marketplace just showed up and it worked. And it just goes to show that markets are inherently stable. If they're allowed to essentially actualize, they have a tendency towards stability, not disorder, which is in direct contrast to what a lot of your more statist economics professors will tell you. They are so wrong. But anyway, Grateful Dead. I could go for. I would really, man. I would give almost anything to see Jerry Garcia play with the Grateful Dead one more time in in the summer show. That would be the best. Anyway, that ain't gonna happen. Anyway, from the unserious to the sadly serious, I figured I'd take this moment to just talk briefly about September 11th. It's not it's what is it? So it's the 23rd anniversary. And I will say, my kids are all Gen Z, and they're all born after September 11th, and they really have no concept of what that meant. When September 11th happened, I was working for an insurance company in a big office building in Fairfax, Virginia. And I can remember my wife, she called me, she said, Nick, a plane hit the World Trade Center. And I was like, what? And then she goes, another one hit the other building. And I looked over, I remember looking at one of the insurance underwriters, who worked next to me at this office. And I said, we're at war. I mean, it just seems, I don't know why. I thought that was, I knew that, but I don't know. I mean, in college, I had studied a lot about terrorism and the emergence of Al Qaeda. Actually, I was actually surprised by how little a lot of the supposed experts knew about Al Qaeda in the days after the attacks. But anyway, we can talk about that some other time. But anyway, that happened. And I remember it was such a beautiful, beautiful, late summer day. And I remember, watching the towers fall, watching it on TV in the workout room in the basement of the building, people crying. And I remember driving home in a traffic jam in Fairfax County after we had, heard that the Pentagon had been hit too. It was bizarre. It was like, I don't know, it was like 11 in the morning or something, and the roads were jam-packed. I remember getting to my apartment in Centerville, and I'm pulling in. I don't know what I'm going to do. My wife works right next to Dulles Airport at the time, and I'm thinking about, should I go get her? What does she want to do? And she's saying, no, I have to stay at work. I won't get into it. Why? Nothing government or anything like that, but she felt obliged. She needed to be where she would need to be. That's my wife for you. She's a good woman. But I remember I pulled into the parking lot of our apartment, and I looked over, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this woman who's probably, I don't know, mid-20s or something. And in one hand, she's dragging her toddler to the car. Okay. And in the other hand, she has got a shotgun. And I'm like, okay, the world has changed. And after that, I remember I went and met my wife. We went and had lunch. They were shutting down the fast food place we were at, but we were right next to Dulles. I remember looking up at the blue sky and seeing F-16s over Dulles Airport just banking left and right. It was just crazy. But with September 11th and the crash of 2008 and COVID have probably been the three most impactful disasters of my life. I just thought I'd take a moment to, kind of tell you this, the abbreviated version of that day. Everybody's got their own version, but I was just thinking about it today, so I included it. Anyway, until next time, I'm Nick Sorrentino, and this has been the Against Crony Capitalism podcast, too.